Hey everyone, get ready to dive into the fascinating world of problem solving. I don't know about you, but I'm always looking for ways to, boost my brain power. And today we're going to unlock a method that promises to do just that.
That's right. We're taking a deep dive into the work of George Polya, a mathematician who dedicated his life to understanding not just how we solve problems, but how we can actually get better at it.
Okay, color me intrigued, but before we get into the nuts and bolts of his methods, let's set the stage a bit. Who was George Polya? I understand he was part of this elite group with a pretty interesting nickname, something about Martians.
He was. George Polya was a Hungarian-American mathematician who taught at some of, well, arguably the most prestigious institutions in the world, ETH, Zurich, Stanford. And you're right, he was considered one of the Martians.
The Martians.
Yeah, is this group of brilliant, mostly Hungarian, actually, scientists and mathematicians who came to the U.S. in the early 20th century. I think John von Neumann, the father of modern computing, he was another Martian.
Wow, talk about an impressive crew. So what made them Martians? Did they walk around with antennas or something?
Not quite. It was partly a playful nod to their accents, I think, but mostly it was because their intellect just seemed out of this world. You know, their ability to solve complex problems, their unique ways of thinking. It was like they were from another planet.
I can see why people called them that. So back to Polya. How did he become the guy for understanding how we solve problems?
You see, Polya was fascinated by the process of problem solving itself. Not just arriving at the right answer, but the steps we take, the strategies we use, how we can train our minds to become more efficient and effective problem solvers.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially in a world that seems to throw more and more complex problems our way every day. So where do we even begin?
The best place to start is with, well, the foundation of Polya's method, his famous four-step process for solving problems. He laid these out in his book, How to Solve It, and they really are the cornerstones for approaching any challenge.
Okay, let's hear it. What's step one?
It all starts with understanding the problem.
Okay.
And this might seem obvious, but Polya argued that many of us, we jump into problem solving without fully grasping what we're actually trying to solve.
So it's more than just reading the problem, it's about really, I don't know, dissecting it, right?
Exactly. Imagine this. You're in a meeting,
Yeah.
and someone presents a problem. Let's say sales are down. The knee-jerk reaction might be to just start brainstorming solutions, right? But without truly understanding why sales are down, you're just throwing darts in the dark.
That's a great point. I can see how that applies to so many areas of life, not just in like a business context or something. Okay, so once we've, really wrapped our heads around the problem, then what?
Then and only then do we move on to step two, devising a plan.
All right, time to strategize. So does Polya offer like a specific one-size-fits-all plan that we should be using?
Not exactly. Instead of a rigid plan, he offers more of a toolbox. A set of different approaches you can choose from depending on the problem at hand. We're talking strategies like guess and check, breaking the problem down into smaller parts, looking for patterns, even working backward from a potential solution.
I like that it's about, having a variety of options, not just being stuck with one approach. Okay, so we understand the problem, we've devised our plan, now we execute,
You
right?
got it. Step three is to carry out the plan. This is where you roll up your sleeves and put those problem-solving muscles to work.
This is the part where a lot of us might stumble though, right?
Right.
We hit a roadblock and just kind of get discouraged.
Absolutely. But Polya stresses that even the most brilliant minds, they encounter obstacles. The key is to be persistent, to not give up at the first sign of difficulty. And this is crucial, to be willing to adjust your approach if needed.
That's so important. Sometimes our initial plan just isn't the right fit and we need to be, flexible enough to switch gears.
No.
Okay, so we've understood the problem, planned our attack, put in the work. What's the final step in Polya's method?
The final and perhaps most crucial step is to look back, to reflect on the process.
Okay.
And this isn't just about checking your answer, though that's important too. It's about analyzing your approach,
Yeah.
identifying what worked well, what could have been done differently, and extracting valuable lessons you can apply to future problems.
So it's about like squeezing every drop of learning out of the experience, even if we didn't get the answer we expected.
Exactly. Even mistakes are valuable learning opportunities if we take the time to understand them. Now, these four pillars, understanding the problem, devising a plan, carrying out the plan, and looking back, they create the foundation of Polya's method.
It's a really solid framework for tackling any problem, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But like any good builder will tell you, You need the right tools to build something truly remarkable, and that's where Polya's work on heuristics comes in.
Okay, heuristics. That word sounds a bit intimidating, but I'm ready to hear how these tools can help us become, problem-solving pros.
Don't worry, they're not as complicated as they sound. Think of heuristics as mental shortcuts, strategies that can make those really tough problems just a bit more manageable. And the best part, they can be applied to all sorts of challenges, not just, mathematical equations.
So instead of just staring at a problem feeling stuck, heuristics give us a way to kind of jumpstart our thinking. I like it. What are some examples of these mental shortcuts?
Well, one of the heuristics Polya talks about is analogy. It's a really powerful tool that taps into our brain's natural ability to see those patterns, make connections.
Analogy, like finding similarities between things. I'm all about a good analogy.
Exactly. Let's say you're learning a new language, which can feel pretty daunting, right?
Uh,
But if you think by analogy, you might relate it to a language you already know. You start to see these parallels in the grammar, the sentence structure. Suddenly, this new language, it feels a bit less foreign.
that's a great example. I can see how drawing on what we already know can make like unfamiliar territory just feel a bit more approachable. What about some of the other heuristics Polya talks about?
Another really powerful one is generalization. Instead of getting bogged down in the specifics of a single problem, you try to find kind of a broader pattern, a more general rule that applies to a whole class of problems.
So it's about kind of zooming out to see the bigger picture rather than getting lost in the details.
Exactly. Think about planning a trip. Instead of focusing on the specifics of one destination, let's say Paris, for example, you might generalize and ask yourself, what kind of experience am I really looking for? Adventure, relaxation, cultural immersion. This broader view can really help you narrow down your options, make a more informed decision.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got analogy, finding those helpful comparisons, and generalization, taking a step back to see that bigger picture. What other tools do we have in this problem-solving toolkit?
Well, in a way, it's the opposite of generalization. It's called specialization.
Intriguing. So instead of zooming out, we're kind of zooming in.
Precisely. Specialization is about taking a complex problem and breaking it down into smaller, more manageable subproblems.
Okay, so it's like taking that massive, intimidating task and, I don't know, transforming it into a series of smaller, less daunting steps.
Exactly. Imagine you're writing a novel. Instead of trying to tackle the entire book at once, you might specialize and just focus on, let's say, crafting a single chapter, or even just a scene at a time. This makes the otherwise overwhelming task of writing a book feel much more achievable.
This is all starting to click now. We've got the 4 pillars as our foundation, and these heuristics, analogy, generalization, specialization as our strategic tools. I'm already starting to feel like I can tackle anything. But before we get too carried away, we haven't even touched on how Polya's work impacted education. I imagine his ideas had a pretty big ripple effect.
They absolutely did. Polya's work, it wasn't just about solving math problems. It was about transforming the way we think about learning, especially in mathematics.
So his influence, it kind of extended beyond just the classroom.
Absolutely. It went to the core of how we learn and how we teach.
Mm.
His ideas helped shift math education away from rote memorization, just drilling formulas and equations, and towards a more active inquiry-based approach.
So instead of just like feeding students information, it's about empowering them to become, active learners, to think critically, to really engage with the material.
Exactly. It's about helping students develop a deeper understanding of the why behind the what. Instead of just memorizing, let's say, the Pythagorean theorem, they're encouraged to explore, why does it work? How does it connect to other geometric concepts?
I can see how that would make learning so much more, I don't know, meaningful and engaging. It's about fostering a love of learning, not just a fear of getting the wrong answer.
You got it. And this approach, it goes hand in hand with Polya's emphasis on productive struggle.
Now, hold on. Productive struggle. Isn't the goal to make learning, especially in like a subject like math, less of a struggle?
That's a common misconception. Polya recognized that struggle, it's a natural and essential part of the learning process. It's in those moments of grappling with a concept, of trying different approaches, that our brains are really firing, really forming those deep connections.
So it's not about like shielding students from challenges, but rather about equipping them with the tools and the mindset to kind of face those challenges head on.
Exactly. And this ties back to his 4-step method beautifully. Remember that final step, look back. it plays a crucial role in helping students embrace those moments of struggle.
So it's about reframing those, mistakes as opportunities for growth rather than something to be like feared.
Precisely. It's about helping students develop that resilience, that growth mindset that says, okay, I didn't get it right this time, but what can I learn from this experience?
This has been so eye-opening, but before we, get ahead of ourselves, I want to make sure we bring all of this back to our listeners and how they can apply Polya's brilliant methods to their own lives, which we'll dive into right after this quick break.
And we're back. We've been on quite the journey with George Polya exploring his incredible insights into the art and science of problem solving. But let's be honest, the real magic happens when we take these ideas out of the textbook and actually apply them to our own lives.
Absolutely. And the beauty of Polya's methods is that they're not just for, mathematicians or academics, that for anyone who's ever felt stuck,
Yeah.
frustrated, overwhelmed by a challenge.
And let's be real, who hasn't felt that way at some point, right?
Yeah.
So where do we even begin to apply these really powerful problem-solving techniques in our day-to-day lives? Well, it all starts with recognizing those moments when we're facing a problem, and I'm not just talking about, a tricky math equation here. It could be anything. A frustrating work project, a creative rut, figuring out how to finally declutter that spare room.
Okay, so we're talking about those everyday challenges that can sometimes leave us feeling, well, stuck. What's the first step in kind of tackling them like a Polya pro?
Remember that crucial first pillar. Understand the problem. It's even more relevant in our daily lives than we might realize. Instead of immediately jumping into like solution mode, hit the pause button for a second and take the time to really define the challenge at hand.
So if I'm, let's say, feeling overwhelmed by like a never-ending to-do list, I shouldn't just like dive headfirst into the first task.
Exactly. That's like trying to assemble a bookshelf without even looking at the instructions first. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what am I really trying to achieve here? What does success actually look like in this situation?
It's about kind of cutting through the chaos to really find the core of the issue. I like it. So once we've, clearly defined the problem, what's next?
This is where we put those problem-solving tools to work those heuristics we talked about. Ask yourself, which tool might be most helpful in this particular situation?
Okay, time to channel our inner problem-solving ninjas. But how do we even know, like, which heuristic to use?
Well, let's say you're feeling, I don't know, stuck on a creative project. Think back to the analogy heuristic. Could you maybe draw inspiration from a different field or a different discipline? Maybe look at how architects approach design or how musicians compose a symphony.
So it's about finding those unexpected sources of inspiration by looking outside our usual boxes.
Exactly. Or let's say you're facing, a large, daunting task, like planning a big move or tackling a home renovation. Think about specialization. Could you break down that massive project into, smaller, more manageable steps?
Suddenly that overwhelming task feels a lot less intimidating when you break it down into like bite-sized pieces.
It's all about finding those stepping stones to kind of lead you toward your ultimate goal.
And that brings us to that crucial third pillar, carrying out the plan. This is where action takes center stage.
Exactly. This is where you roll up your sleeves, put in the effort, and keep those problem-solving muscles working. And remember, it's not always going to be a smooth ride. You might encounter roadblocks, unexpected detours, at those moments where you feel like giving up.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
But this is where Polya's emphasis on persistence really comes into play.
Absolutely. Remember, even the most brilliant minds, they face setbacks. It's about embracing those challenges as opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
And being willing to adjust your approach if needed.
So if our initial plan isn't working, we don't just give up. We adapt, we get creative, and we find a new path forward.
Exactly. And through it all, remember that final crucial step, look back. No matter the outcome, take the time to reflect on the process. What worked well? What could you have done differently? What did you learn that you can carry with you into future challenges?
It's about turning, every experience, every problem we solve into a valuable learning opportunity.
Precisely. And that's the beauty of Polya's method. It empowers us to approach challenges with a more confident, resilient, and strategic mindset.
This has been such an incredible journey into the world of problem solving. We've learned so much from George Polya, from his famous four-step method to those powerful heuristics that can really help us, unstick our thinking.
It's been a pleasure diving into these ideas with you. And remember, Becoming a more effective problem solver, it's a journey. It's not a destination. So embrace the process. Never stop learning.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought inspired by George Polya himself. What's one problem you've been putting off, big or small? It could be, decluttering your inbox or finally tackling that creative project you've been dreaming about. Whatever it is, choose one problem and try applying Polya's method today. Who knows? You might just surprise yourself with what you can achieve.